journey for both the producer and the writer-director. Vikram Mohinta has produced one of my favorite films and one of the best films that was produced last year called Labor of Love. He's been through the ground and he doesn't look like he's been through the ground, but he's been through the ground. And he'll bring in the perspective of how as a producer you need to make choices which are tough, convince the writer-director that limited releases are a good option, and also how newer waves in the industry in terms of release patterns can be altered. Lastly, Joanna comes in with the expertise of coming from a very big agency called Wide. She started a brilliant initiative called Outreach with Heretic. They're a very, what would be the word? Extremely curatorial in their approach to identify 6 films in a year which they believe can reach the world audience, and how they can create festival strategies, consult with you into identifying the right distributors for your film to travel across the world. So if you're here to listen about Bollywood commercial films, this is not the panel, but let's talk about how independent films can really change and how creative excellence can survive the tough business realities. Francois, Francois. My pronunciation is wrong. Francois, I wanted to start with the conversation about how we've had multiple ways in which co-productions have been very effective with your country. And I wanted to understand from the very beginning, right at the inception stage, when a script is ready, why is it that the government of France is more supportive of, or what is the ecosystem that they have created that we can learn from, where private money is not killing or letting us bootstrap our creative freedom?
Well, France is, as you know, like a dream. I'm Portuguese, but I'm living in Paris for a long time. The French system is, yes, it's incredible. Several countries have replicated the system. For example, Korea, they replicated the French system. And what's happened in this country in 10, 15 years, in Korea, I mean, they came from almost 0 films to now, they're producing around 100 films per year. It's a 40 million country, Korea. Funny to start with Korea to come back to France, but wait. And more than this, the market share for Korean films is more than 50%. So the system works quite well. Now, what I wanted to explain is this ecosystem, the French ecosystem, is totally financed by you, by the audience. Every time that someone goes to a cinema, part of the ticket goes to a state body called CNC, Center National for Cinematography, and this money is redistributed to the whole ecosystem, from the carpet in the cinemas to the script writers. This is one possibility, but considering also the number of ways that you have to watch films, and television is one of this. For example, you have this fantastic example of a private TV called Canal+. And Canal+, every time that you pay monthly, Canal+, every time that you pay, part of this money is also going on the production body of Canal+ to invest on cinema. So at the end, what government is doing and what we are asking the government is to do what? Just to do efficient policies. And this is exactly why the French ecosystem works very well. And of course, after that, you have also on the regional funds, this kind of thing. But it is mainly funded by this CNC. So now, coming back to the beginning of your question, if you are a script writer, you have a script, you can apply for a development fund. It can go to, well, euros and dollars, it's almost the same now, unfortunately, but let's say you can have between 50 and 100,000 to develop. Then to shoot your film, and to shoot, for example, Labor of Love, the cost of Labor of Love was, you will tell us, you can fully finance a film just by this fund. At the end, France, which is a 62 million inhabitant, is producing more than 200 films per year. the number of admissions in the cinemas is still around 200 million admissions. So everything works very well. It's a perfect world.
Wow.
Almost.
And now I come back to a little bit of an imperfect world with Arjun. I wanted to understand that as a writer-director, and both Vikram and Arjun can take this question. You are a producer, Vikram, and Arjun, you're a writer-director. I want to understand what is the ecosystem, like what is the relationship that you have shared with your producers in terms of controlling creative freedom, and how encouraging do you think you can be to each other in terms of making sure that the story that you want to tell really reaches the audiences, but also makes sure that it doesn't inhibit the distribution opportunities that might exist?
Well, in my case, I worked in tandem with the people putting in the money, the producers. And I think it's very important that the producers and the director and the writer are all on the same page. I mean, once we present the screenplay to the producers, obviously there are discussions, but they, in my case, they greenlighted the project with very little change, because we had worked for months on the script and kept them in the loop. So once it was done, it was done, and there wasn't much change in it. There was some stuff, and I don't think there should ever be a tussle between the director and the producer, though there usually is. But I think both people are on the same team and working to make a film, and a film is both a business which aspires to be a work of art and also a work of art which wants to be a business. So I don't think there's a separation between the two, really. And so, yeah, always work hand in hand with the producer and make sure that everyone's on the same page right from inception to the release date. Yeah.
So would you be open to creating two cuts where you tell your story for the rest of the world, where you don't have to censor stuff? And
Yeah, absolutely. Like in my film, there are a couple of songs in the film, background songs, no one singing and dancing to them, which I would have rather left out, but I didn't because of the sensibilities of the Indian market, which is very important to me as a first-time filmmaker. And maybe for a foreign release, we will not have the songs, but so far, from the reception that it's received abroad, just screeners of the rough cut, no one's actually said we don't want the songs. So let's see.
like it. What about you?
Okay, firstly, I just want to add to what Francois said. I just want to acknowledge the French system. We've been fortunate to get funding from CNC for our next film, my next film with Aditya. So,
Congratulations.
I mean, thank you for that. Thank you for being part of that system. Okay, now about the whole creative discussion. So with Labor of Love, it was a completely self-funded film. So I don't think, I mean, you know, that was a point there. But now that we're working on developing our next film, the thing is that, I mean, between my director and I genuinely believe it needs to be a collaborative process for it to be successful, for the end product to be a successful product, because, and at the end of the day, as a producer, you need to acknowledge that, you know, the creative decision is best taken by the director, you know. But I will say it is challenging. So for the next film, we have sort of been, you know, we have met a couple of financiers to try and raise money, and there are inevitably questions like, you know, who's starring in, and this is, I'm talking about Indian money here, this is, you know, who's starring in the film, you know, why does it have to be in Bengali, why can't it be in Hindi? And, you know, it does not make sense, it's based in Calcutta, and, you know, the story just will not make sense. But it's sometimes a bit, you know, challenging in the sense that you're not getting these questions when you're reaching out to international producers, funds, financiers, and people in your own country don't sort of understand, you know, how this should happen. So, yeah, it is, I will say for independent cinema, it is a challenge, but I think, I mean, I can speak as a producer in you know, in the context that I have witnessed so far. I think it's the producers especially, and even the directors, responsibility to sort of figure out how to get around these challenges and make the film they've always wanted to make. Because the moment you start compromising, there will, you know, that shows. I mean, I don't know how
it shows in the final product.
It really does, yeah.
And coming from there, Abhay, you've extensively supported first-time directors by believing in their writing and believing in making sure that their films really translate to the audiences. I wanted to ask you, what were the challenges that you faced as an actor who has a lot of commercial appeal as well in the market to make very conscious decisions to choose and to support these writer-directors?
The challenges are typical. So if you have it's like if you're a first-time actor, no one's seen you. Very few people take a chance on you unless your family or friends or you've done something to get that film. So with directors, it's the same thing. They are worried of a director's capabilities while they're debuting. I would rest my guess on the scripts. And this is, we're talking 2006, 7, 8, you know, and there wasn't so much change happening back then as it is now. It was even more unfriendly an environment, and even the producers who took on the directors I was taking on were also first-time producers because nobody wanted to work with them either. So it was a thing of getting together with people who have a common cause and no support, so they supported each other, so to speak.
So it's primarily that you relied on the quality of the script that pushed you and the belief that the directors who were approaching you were...
Yeah, I mean, there were various directors. Some of them had done ads, so I could see their ads along with the writing. Another point I wanted to make was, even back then, writing wasn't... I mean, if they had a bound script, they'd come up to you with pride and say, oh, look, I have a bound script, like as if they've achieved something. But, yeah, I was like, that's your first step. Don't be so proud. It should be a good script. But because there was lack of writers as well, so a lot of times, almost all the first-time directors wrote their own stuff or co-wrote it with someone. So I could guess their ability from their writing skills. I don't think I ever worked with a first-timer who hadn't at least written his or her own script, if not had some advertising work behind them to show along with the script. So I was resting on that. But the one thing that worked against us was not if the film was bad, because a lot of them didn't do well theatrically, but did well on the DVD and satellite market. And that's where I learned that having a good product is one thing, but if it's not marketed and released and has a platform to stand on, if no one knows it's playing, it's not going to do well. And which is why 3 or 4 times I've had people say, that was such a good film. When did it come out? Why didn't it do well? I'm like, you answered your own question. You asked me, when did it come out? That's why it didn't do well.
So marketing, P&A. A very big question, and if filmmakers are a part of the audience, they struggle, producers struggle with P&A. Ioana, since we are still on the writing stage of the discussion, I want to bring your perspective into how, first of all, how did Heretic Outreach start, and what was the purpose? Because I feel there's a direct alliance in terms of seeking out the right kind of guidance at this level of production, which is development and supporting development, which we hardly pay attention to in this part of the world.
Yes, so Heretic Outreach actually started, the concept was we wanted to create a sales agent initiative which would be very producer-friendly for very independent productions, so art house films, etc. And the idea was to create an initiative which would understand the needs of an independent producer and work closely on each film. So the idea was to not work on more than 6 or 7 films per year in order to really be able to focus on each film, work on the marketing of each film in a customized way, not have a classical model that we apply on all the films. When we talk and pitch the films to our partners, festivals, distributors, TV channels, VOD platforms, etc., exhibitors, to be able to focus on few films each time and work on the needs of each film and in a realistic way, which would mean also for the producer to see some revenue from his films, so not explode budgets on the film that won't be needed if it's an independent production. So I guess
one very big question is, which has popped every time, is that there are too many expenses attached to beginning a relationship with a sales agent. By the time there's any recoupment, half of it has gone into just reimbursing expenses that the sales agent put through, going to markets, going to festivals. How do you control that?
Well, that was also one of the reasons we started Heretic Outreach. It was, on one hand, it would mean that we would spend less on some marketing costs that, I mean, of course, we have costs on the films because it's important for the film to be visible and seen as it should. But we don't have outrageous costs on the film, which means that if we spend less and we work very closely in a very independent and alternative way directly with the producer and the filmmaker, and we discuss directly what the film needs, and it's also very important for us to really work closely with the filmmaker or the producer of a film, because it's their baby and they know the film better than anyone. So once we are okay with what we think the film needs, we don't spend outrageous amounts. And from the first deal, the producer sees money. So the idea was to not recoup non-existent costs or outrageous costs, but really work on sales and festival percentages, in a very honest way. And also from the first deal, the producer sees money, because we focus on a region where we know that a producer, even if it's a small amount, he might need it to end the film, to complete the film, to finish it, to pay some people that were involved in the film, or help him live while developing his new film. So all these things are very important.
We really hope that you start an India chapter soon. We need you. Okay, coming back to a little bit focus on how the Indian releases really work, and why is there serious attachment to a theatrical release? And Arjun, I want to ask you as a very, very candid question. The whole attachment to be able to see your film in a big screen, is it inherent towards the fact that you want a 1,000 screen release, or I'm trying to drive a point about what's the choice between limited releases versus taking on a huge P&A spend and making a film bear the risk of struggling with a release date where another Bollywood blockbuster is releasing as well. And the sensibilities of this market, as in today we seek entertainment as a form of escape and not really watch real independent cinema. So how do you make that choice about choosing to go theatrical, number one, and how Vikram and Abhay, you also produced and released a film. How do you make the choice of wanting to choose a number of screens and add that burden onto the film?
Okay, so again, I'll just talk about my personal experience with Labor of Love. We were very clear that we wanted a theatrical release purely because it's things like even basic hygiene for the film, like getting reviewed, etc. You need to be in theaters for that to happen, and also it's like Abhay was saying, people will ask you when did it never release and things like that. It's something you need, especially, I don't know, we thought it was integral to the journey of the film, and we wanted it to happen. As Logic said, we first went out to distributors, and they had this one-size-fits-all policy, which is, you pay us X amount, and this is like huge. We could have made another film in those amounts. Pay us this much and we'll get it to 200 screens, 300 screens, things like that. And honestly, the fact is, as a filmmaker, as a director, as a producer, you guys know the film better than anyone else. And we knew that it was not a film that needed to go out that much, and it made no sense for the film to go out. We initially tried talking to distributors to get them along to, get them to our point of view. Did not work. which is when we took the decision to actually distribute the film ourselves. So I personally went, sat down with all the exhibitors, and to the point that we wanted to focus on, because the film was set in Calcutta, we wanted to focus on the Bengal market. Also, the press we got there was, was something we wanted to capitalize on. And so I literally went to Calcutta. I had meetings with Inox there because they're the biggest players there. I sat with PVR in Bombay. I sat with the PVR regional team in Delhi to figure out things like, which is the screen, what time, actually ask them for numbers, like, what are your footfalls on weekdays, weekends. So for example, in Bombay, in PVR Phoenix, on the weekend we had afternoon shows, and on the weekdays we had evening shows. So that's the level we went down to tailoring our release plan. And honestly, that's something no one else can do for you. So if you feel, of course, you have a big film, you have a film like Bahubali, of course you want to be in every screen, every showtime, because the film has that potential. So you want to capitalize on it. But, for us, it made no sense to sink money into it just for the fun of saying, we released our film. So, like Arjun also rightly said, at the end of the day, it's also a business. And if we don't recover money, there's, can't make the next film. So we sat down, we did a whole tailor-made approach. And, I think, we got our dividends out of it. We did make, we made money off the release, whatever little it was. In Calcutta, we actually, they came back to us, they increased our screens, increased our showtimes. We ran for 7 weeks in Calcutta. So it was a really, really big success for us. And yeah, I think that's the thing. You can't sort of think that, just because it's a film, it needs to be like any other film. You need to have a tailor-made sort of strategy for your film. If there are any of you filmmakers out here. And be sure and be confident of your audiences, understand your audiences, and figure out the ways to reach them. That's it, yeah.
Great. How do P&A funds really hinder releases is the next question. Of course, Abhay, would you want to take that? Or
Nowadays the marketing budget of the film is as much as the production budget of the film.
yeah, like $1 million is the minimum that you should go out with.
Yeah, so I think it just doubles your cost. So what you could have done in 50, you have to do it in 100. It just adds that much more of money to be made and pressure to deliver. And then it also becomes even more disheartening when you have spent that money and you finally got it to the platform. You have only a small window until the mainstream film comes and pushes you out. As you were saying about timing, it's really important to get the right timing. And sometimes even with the money, you don't get that timing because the exhibitor doesn't give it to you because you're not considered mainstream until it becomes a cult hit on DVD. So it affects you. Because what it does, essentially, if it doesn't do well for so many factors, let's say the film is good and other factors didn't make it work, people then say, look, we told you, experimentation does not pay off. We're not built to watch this stuff. So now try and do something different. That is if they give you something different to do, because they'll just say you flopped.
Right. Yes, please.
No, I just wanted to add that we are living a fantastic era. I'm old enough to say that I was born even, when I was 20, Mark Zuckerberg was not born yet. Facebook, of course not, because it's only 15 years.
I should be calculating right now. What would you be
I'm still very young. So we are living a fantastic era regarding P&A. This is what I wanted to add. Also in this era, pre-Zuckerberg, we were having reels. Now we have DCPs. You can upload, download the films.
Yes.
Just as an example, I was not involved on the release of Bahubali in India, taking care about the sales and marketing abroad. But what I know is the money spent on advertising was very, very, very low. Why? Now, thanks Zuckerberg, thanks Facebook, and thanks the social media. It just means that Labor of Love or Bahubali, you can advertise your film through here by chance. You have this star system, very powerful star system, As an example again, the 4 stars of Bahubali have accumulated 30 million fans on Facebook.
Yes.
Rajamouli itself has 2.8 or 2.2 million followers on Twitter. This is a huge capital. So the P&A today is not a problem anymore, first. Second, coming back to the beginning, shooting a film, also when you see Labor of Love, great film again, I've seen it also, long time ago. It's a film, I mean, you can shoot this film with not a lot of money. The problem that you're facing here, it's also the beginning of a new era here in India. The problem is the number of screens.
Yes.
I mean, how come you have only, I think, 14,000
14,000
when China has 35 and China just added 10,000 in the past 5 years? Okay, the real estate here, that's it, what everybody is saying, real estate here is very expensive. What about China? Same. I mean, what is the price of a square meter in Shanghai or Beijing is the same.
For screen density, I think there are more issues than just the cost. There are policy problems that exist from the 50s, like it's yesteryears. And I also was a part of I was privy to a meeting where the Producers Guild was sitting and they were talking about screen density, and they said that you can't construct a screen 1 kilometer, within 1 kilometer radius of a school and a temple. And all of us know that there are temples under every tree, every corner in this country. So there was a literal rule, and that's what exhibitors really struggle with.
How will they manage with the shopping malls? Because I think, I mean, there is a growth, incredible growth of shopping malls, and in every shopping mall we'll find cinemas.
Yeah,
I don't think that the temple is a problem. It's never a problem. Temple is never a problem.
In France. Maybe,
But
yes.
I mean, can you build a shopping mall close to a temple?
If you can have a temple and if you want to build a road, you'll build the road around it. Or a tree.
That's true. So, very, very well put. The screen density is also a very big issue. With independence, we don't need so many screens, so we love it that we can have a limited way out. But P&A does add, and I understand with your point of view that there is a lot of social media platforms that are equally available. Like they don't really create a bias with how much you spend, even though Facebook is doing it these days. But Google, Facebook, Twitter, these are platforms, now Instagram and Snapchat, that's the in thing, are ways to really make sure that the word of mouth really helps, the grapevine helps. And of course, ultimately, it's the quality of the product that really rides it through as well. I want to come back to a conversation where, what about this huge surge and wave of digital that is taking over? I believe very strongly that with the launch of Netflix across world territories, there is a newer way to reach almost 7.2 billion people across the world. Let's cut it by half who can have access to the screens, but that's a huge number of audiences, which is also one of the very key objectives for a filmmaker, for a writer-director, that his film is seen, along with recouping costs and making money. Where do we fall here? Like with sales agents, I want to understand, they want to carve out. They want everything. So when they want the world territories, where they want to carve out SVOD, there's subscription video on demand rights, how do you go with the traditional route of selling piecemeal territories, full rights to the countries and the distributors? Is there a change? Is there an evolution among the sales agencies to change that whole pattern of retaining SVOD rights and only selling TVOD and satellite and theatrical? Because that's important as well.
To be clear, I really think that Netflix has to be the last window. I mean, the first window is still the cinemas.
Absolutely.
And we have to fight for that. And including in certain territory, I can tell you again an example. I mean, Bahubali has been sold almost everywhere except Russia, for example. They are offering us small price, no cinemas. We said no, doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. But the problem is there is a huge crisis in Russia, so it's very difficult to have access to cinemas, and Hollywood is there.
Francois, like, let's talk. Bahubali is, of course, a great example, but it is also a big blockbuster for any standard.
No, Bahubali is nothing out of India. No, sorry. Sorry. As I said this morning...
I thought it did exceptionally well in the US market as well.
Sorry?
It did very
Within
well.
the Telugu community and Indian diaspora. That's it. That's
it did not travel globally.
I'm sorry, I'm always saying the same thing when I'm invited at this kind of panel. Nobody knows anything about Indian cinema out of India and out of the 30, 40 million diaspora. Again, Shah Rukh Khan can go to Champs-Élysées in Paris without any problem. It's not, I mean, it's not arrogant, it's nothing, just a fact.
No, it is true.
It's just a fact. But when you were the other fact is the Indian cinema is so powerful. You guys are watching since the beginning. This culture is so strong. I can understand that sometimes you don't understand what is happening elsewhere. But anyway, this is a fact. So Bahubali, when we come with Bahubali to Peru, Brazil, or Germany, we are like labor of love.
Yeah.
But the interesting fact is there is a kind of attraction because there is a huge demand of Indian content abroad. Not only yoga. Look at what is happening with yoga everywhere. I mean, all the women in Europe, especially the Americans, which are not living in Europe, the Americans, they all have, I mean, yoga sessions or whatever. There is a huge demand. If you create the right content, the channels are there. But will creative excellence survive to business reality? For sure. But we just have to create the right content, not product, content.
That's the problem. The problem lies in trying to get the right content made, because the reason why it doesn't travel outside of the Indian diaspora is because that diaspora is being catered to, and they're very good at catering to them. So when you try and tell them who provide that content to do something that caters outside, they ask, well, why? I have my bubble. I don't need to move out of it. Why make the effort to create new content? There's no reason for it. I have an Indian audience. I don't care about the non-Indian audiences, so why should I? That's where the struggle is. For me, my desire to create original content wasn't to go necessarily for a larger or universal audience. It was also just to be satisfied with making something original, something that you haven't, or the community perhaps hasn't seen before. And that, as I think you were saying, will travel, but no one funds that.
That's interesting. From Bahubali, we come back to Lunchbox. We go to Lunchbox.
Yes.
Lunchbox is a fascinating project and case. I remember I was at Bazaar when they were, I forget the name of the director. Anyway, what is his name again?
Ritesh Batra.
Okay, Ritesh Batra. I had a meeting with him. It was obvious that the film was really interesting. Why? What is interesting the audience abroad and the possible partners is something that is really rooted and grounded here. Don't try to imitate anybody.
Okay, no. Francois, no, I agree with what you're saying, but Lunchbox, okay, let me take the example. If you're catering to the Indian market, Lunchbox was something that traveled globally, but if it made, let's say, $4 million in France and Germany each, it made only $4 in India also. What I'm trying to say is that it was being watched by a global audience. Indians and diaspora audiences were not watching the film because the film did not cater.
What is the problem? Woody Allen has the same problem in the US.
So that's a great example. And
Angelopoulos has the same problem was having in Greece. Manuel de Oliveira is more well known in France, in Paris, than Lisbon.